intimidates and calls people to his office so that you can give him part of that cash. That's a shame. So yes, I will place, as opposed to my sister here, probably she's much more conversant with the program itself, but being a governance expert, I'll tell you, there are things that you don't actually compromise, including that payment and the evidence of that receipt from the government.
Ms. Masinde, let me ask you, so Kenya got 27 out of 100. From where you sit, and having worked, when you're working within Transparency International, what are the key issues that Kenya needs to address if our position globally needs to improve?
I think for one, we need to look at the issues around political goodwill, because in the last, say, 4 years, we have made several commitments towards the fight against corruption, made promises, commitments, proclaimed measures that we're going to take. I remember after the list of shame of 2015, there are all these new raft of measures that are going to be undertaken on procurement and other measures to improve transparency and accountability within the system. There was the, also following the list of shame was the Attorney General's task force on the legal policy and institutional framework on the fight against corruption. And there's a chock full of recommendations in that report. Very nice recommendations, I must add, touching on policy, legal, and institutional efforts that we need to undertake to bolster the fight against corruption. In 2016, we had the famous UK anti-corruption conference, where again Kenya made serious anti-corruption commitments on open governance partnerships, on beneficial ownership, and on asset recovery, and many others. But then, there have been other commitments that we've made. Even last week at the multi-sectoral forum, we had all the leaders of the key sectors giving their commitments towards the fight against corruption. We had the DPP promising more high-level prosecutions in terms of corruption, the judiciary promising to allocate more resources to handle corruption cases, the president also giving orders in terms of issues around conflict of interest and government civil servants who own businesses. So there are all these, I think they're wonderful commitments, but I think we need to get away from commitments and actually see action. So let this year be a year of action. That we have made nice promises on the fight against corruption, but let us implement them. So one of the things we have to do is implement them. And implementation of these commitments needs political goodwill. The second thing we also have to look at is our laws. I think within the region, Kenya is among the countries that has some of, when you look at our legal framework for the fight against corruption, and there are gaps. For instance, I think we need to do a little bit more to protect people who bring corruption cases to the fore, that is the whistleblowers. We need to implement the Access to Information Law, and the Leadership and Integrity Act as well. We need to ensure full enforcement, but at least we have laws. I think what we need to do is translate those laws from just being mere words on paper to real tangible action, so that we can actually, make use of those laws and see change. We also have Chapter 6 of the Constitution, and we also need to ensure that it's applied within the letter and spirit of the law. And then, of course, the other thing, still in line with our legal framework, is having a strong policy framework. We have been in efforts to have an anti-corruption policy, I think for more than 3 or 4 years now, but nothing yet in place. So there are all these processes that have started in the last couple of years, and we need to just take time, pause and see, what we have promised, what we have started doing towards fighting corruption, but haven't really succeeded in implementing, and let's just actually, get these things off the ground.
Ms. Masinde, any Kenyan listening to you right now and you're mentioning commitments, I think they're just cringing because it's always about commitment and commitment and commitment and very little action. Mr. Osere, so there have been, again, commitments to fight corruption in the country. From where you sit as a governance expert, do you see Kenya committed? Do you see the goodwill in fighting corruption? Don't look at just this year or last year, the last couple of years, the years that have gotten us to where we are at 27 out of 100. Do you see that goodwill in fighting corruption in Kenya?
I think I do, especially since last week when all the leaders actually committed themselves to this corruption conference. That's a good move, and I think that's the first of its kind, in my opinion. However, I think there are 4 things that they need to do to make sure that this commitment works. First of all, let's strengthen the institutions that fight corruption over political power. And then 2, closing the gap between the corruption legislation and enforcement. And then 3, let's support our civil societies, organizations, to enhance the political engagements and over government spending, especially, particularly at the local levels. And then 4, let's support a free and fair media, whereby they are free of intimidation and harassment from whoever or from whichever source that comes from. That's my opinion. And I think if they do that, I think that's the right step towards
which institutions, Mr. Sir, which institutions are these that you're saying we need to empower?
We need to empower judiciary, of course, and I had the Justice Maraga talking about technology and they're starved of cash. So we need to make sure that these institutions get the necessary support that they need to actually fight corruption and also be independent from the executive, and also make sure, as Masinde said, we need to see the asset recovery and the evidence of that if these people are convicted. So Kenyans are tired, and this is true. People have been fighting corruption for the last 2 years. There's no major conviction. You know, we can name it from Putney, we can name it from Anglo leasing. Every year there's a scandal and then it just disappears under the water. Why? Because the election cycle. So I'm not sure whether I want to get into politics in terms of changing that constitution to make sure that the presidency is the least attractive so that people come to public service to serve, not to make money, because that's the current situation at this point in time.
It will be very difficult to do that, trust me.
I know, but hey, we got to try.
It will be very, very difficult to do that. Ms. Masinde, in your report, you picked out a number of countries that you said were promising. So you cited Angola, Nigeria, Botswana, South Africa, and Kenya as countries to watch given promising political developments. Maybe you want to explain that to my viewers?
Yeah, well, normally when we conduct the Corruption Perception Index, there are those that we, especially having conducted it since 1995, and looking at the pattern of, results and the scores that these countries have produced in the last 23 or so years, then we are able to see, which countries are headed towards the right direction and which countries are backpedaling. So, for instance, I think Cote d'Ivoire and Angola were given a pat on the back because they've been able to, see some progress in the fight against corruption because their scores have improved over the last 5 or so years. But also, we also highlighted countries where they seem to be backpedaling in the fight against corruption, like Australia. I think the US, for the first time, is not on the top 20 list. And some of the reasons why they could be, the level of corruption perception has probably risen within the U.S., of course, emanate from issues of ethics and leadership. I think that have been well highlighted. So we try to highlight countries, again, also to show them as, good examples for those who are doing well in the fight against corruption. And one of the things that we have highlighted is in some of these countries, you see that they're very strong and effective institutions, particularly those with an oversight mandate. When you look at Parliament, implementing and enforcing their role in the fight against corruption and in ensuring accountability within the country, you'll see that the institutions which are responsible for fighting corruption are well empowered. I think in our case, one of the things we have highlighted in Kenya is that we need to protect the independence and empower our institutions because we have seen the ESCC, the Office of the Auditor General, for instance, which are very key in the fight against corruption. We've seen some form of assault towards their independence, and also some of these institutions have faced very high budgetary deficits, so it means that they don't have adequate resources to be able to perform optimally in the fight against corruption. So in countries which are showing progress in the fight against corruption, you'll see that the effective institutions, you'll see that their laws are enforced, you'll see that there's freedom of media, freedom of expression, access to information, adherence to the rule of law, and those are things that we would like to encourage for Kenya as well.
Right, Mr. Osewe, you get the final word. Where do we move from here? 30 seconds.
Well, first of all, I want to address my fellow Kenyans and citizens. It is our responsibility and obligation to fight corruption, not only to the police or the authorities, because it affects your life directly and more so indirectly. Therefore, let's stop giving bribes to whatever condition it is and force the police or whoever it is to take us to court and do the right thing. Now, to our leaders also, you know we elected you there not to enrich yourself. You went there because what we call public service, that you want to serve us and to the best of your knowledge. Please let's adhere to that. We only have one country. We cannot be better than Somalia, and we cannot be better than Uganda. We are better than everybody else, and we need to get to where we used to be. As much as corruption started in the 60s, it's a good direction, and I congratulate this, the president, the prime minister, and all the leaders that started and attended the corruption conference. So let's stick to it and let's be serious. If we are, we'll win. If we are not, I don't know what to say.
That's a good place to end it. Thank you so much. Sheila Masinde, Programs Manager, Transparency International Kenya, George Osewe, Governance Expert, and of course a big thank you to Raphael Tuju as well, who spoke to Sophia Anuna at the beginning of this show. I'm Linda Ogutu. Have a good night. KTN Prime begins in a couple of minutes with Ben Kitili. We'll see you tomorrow.